Welcome back to another episode of the Cybersecurity Mentors Podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Joe Hudson. We'll be diving into the world of cybersecurity job hunting. Our guest is someone who's been on both sides of the cybersecurity job market. Joe is currently the Director of Growth at TCM Security, where he helps people break into cybersecurity by offering practical advice, training, and guidance. He's also an active mentor in the cybersecurity community, helping professionals navigate the often daunting job market. Welcome, Joe.
Great to be here. Super stoked to be here.
Thanks, Joe. It's good to see you. I think we first met at B-Sides Greenville. I think that's when we first met in person.
Great place.
Yeah.
It's a
great
event.
It was good. Yeah, it was good. Yeah, we've been talking about getting you on for a while, and just you and I connected a couple of times after that, and I feel like we're on the same wavelength of trying to help people and what you do and what we do. And I kind of know a little bit about your story, but I don't know the whole story. And we don't have the whole story, but I'm sure we're going to talk through it. But let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up?
Oh, grew up in the sticks of Virginia, in the mountains. I'm actually going home this weekend for a wedding. Now that I think about it, this was probably my first true social engineering. I got him his prom date by acting like I was him on Instant Messenger back in the day, and kind of never thought he would get married. And sure enough, he's getting married now. So heading back to the sticks. If you ever look at my profile, you'll see a background picture at the top of it was a painting by a local painter, and that was my drive home every day. It's beautiful. Still no internet at my dad's house. No cell phone service at my dad's house. Found out the TV doesn't work anymore. He's fighting me on buying him a new TV. I mean, there's nothing to do, but it makes for such a great break, especially when, you kind of live in the world behind a little screen now.
Yeah.
I'll say, came from a place where there was really no white collar folks. There's just no concept of going corporate or anything. Kind of had this idea in my head that corporate America was terrible and evil growing up. And I think I debunked that myth when I got into recruiting, but you still see shades of it for sure.
Sure.
But, went to college when I was 16. I knew I wanted to be a teacher. That was I took a class that I thought was going to be like an easy A. Turned out to be the most fun I had, just working with third graders at the time. And so I went to college knowing like I want to teach, and did that for 9 years. Taught third grade for 6 years on a military base in Virginia. Newport News area, and then moved up to Northern Virginia and taught Fairfax County Public Schools, so one of the biggest in the country for 3 years. Taught fourth graders, and I had a kid. So, you have a kid, things change, especially your bank account, and realizing, and I've told this story many times, but I was brushing my teeth one morning and it hit me like I'm never going to have any money for the rest of my life. And like I changed my course of thought that day, like literally dropped the kids off and was like texting my friends, anything, any ideas, guys? Like, what can I do that I don't have to reinvent my whole life? And they had always been telling me about sales and recruiting. I was never interested in sales, but stumbled into a job with recruiting purely thanks to my network looking out for me and hooking me up with an interview for a job that honestly on paper I had no business getting. And but I worked my freaking tail off those first 2 years, and I had a great teacher, Tom Mutafis. He was under the gun for a lot of pressure and whatnot, but an excellent teacher of the craft of recruiting and really going that extra step to make sure people's experience was good. And I learned a ton about what really matters to candidates, in that situation. It wasn't a really great job. I didn't care for the company I worked for. That's where I did get to prove the corporate side of the world can have a dark shade to it. But out of desperation, took a job at a startup with a former teammate at that first company who was looking out for me and said, come on over. And that's when I fell into cybersecurity. It was July 22nd, 2017, I believe is when I first started. And didn't know what the heck. I didn't know what I was about to get myself into. Certainly didn't expect to fall in love with it.
Yeah.
Kind of had made my bed like, all right, I love teaching. That was my passion. That's what I really loved. And unfortunately, I'll never have anything that kind of meets that, but I got to go make some money. And it turns out the money became completely irrelevant and secondary to the fulfillment I've had over all the years since. I find this field to be annoying and challenging and wonderful and addictive and just fascinating, but also the biggest part is the people side. And that's what keeps me up at night. And that's where, my lowest days over the last 7-8 years have been because of someone else going through something. And yeah, that's probably a hat I'll never take off, honestly. But I met Heath Adams, my current boss, founder of TCM Security. He was a candidate looking for a pen tester gig, and I was looking to fill a job. And I actually sent him a picture of the guy who turned down that job and said, if this guy never turned down the job, you and I probably would have never met, and I wouldn't be working for you right now. Who knows if you would have become a cyber mentor? Like, who knows, you know?
Yeah.
It's just funny how life works like that. But had a chance to come join him last year, May 22nd, 2023, and have had a great just life experience here. Learned a lot about business, learned a lot about how to work virtually. That was a whole new type of thing. But really here, I'm responsible for all of our sales, working on the consulting side. We have a very busy consulting side, a lot of partnerships with nonprofits and different, B-sides orgs and whatnot, setting up sponsors. He says, hey, use your best judgment. And my judgment, if I love these people, we're going with it. We want to get people some support out there, because the way I've always talked about is like, you'll talk about people networking, right? And everybody tells you to network. I tell people, like, listen, just get yourself in a position for good things to happen. And some of these folks that show up to these conferences, they're not expecting to win, free training or a certification voucher or whatnot. We even give them to top volunteers at these conferences, like we want them to be rewarded. But put yourself in position for some magic to happen. And it's amazing how that can just like, boom, flip a light switch on. So very involved in that, as well as our career coaching PCRP program here. That's one of my favorite things that I get to do, is meet people at the very beginning of their journey. A lot of times they're just, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what direction to go. And to just kind of unpack that puzzle and then put together a game plan individually for people is really, it allows me to keep that recruiter hat on to some degree. So
sure.
Long spiel.
Yeah, no, I want to back up a little bit. So the teaching part, thank you for that. It was really good. So the teaching part, how did you know that's what you wanted to do? How did that spark an interest in you?
It's funny. So there was this game called 24. I remember this, and you had to teach the kids. They would get a card that has 4 numbers on it, and they have to figure out how to multiply, add, divide, and subtract to get 24 as fast as they can. And it was a competition, and I fell in love with it. But I remember this kid, he was really struggling with it, and he just had this breakthrough. And I remember crying. I was 16 years old. I remember crying in the class and be like, I can't let anybody see me cry. Like, I couldn't believe how much it hit me. But I'll never forget that moment, being like, this is probably the greatest feeling I've had. And I had never thought about teaching. I was actually considering like Air Force, and everybody's just, works outside landscaping and farming where I came from. And I already knew I hated that just from all the poison ivy attacks I got. So teaching, that moment, man, it never changed after that. And I had a lot of those moments in teaching that, I remember going to school, and you get all this education for what you're supposed to do as a teacher. And in the first 2 weeks, I had 3 or 4 kids that had some label, autism, Asperger's, whatever. It was kind of a blanket statement. They didn't really know necessarily what kind of plan these kids would need. Probably 10 or 11 kids that were prescribed ADHD medicine. And I realized there was no blueprint, there was no game plan for this from college. You get a little nervous when you're 22 years old and irresponsible, and you've just been given 25 kids that, their parents are coming to you on day one, like, hey, I'd really like to talk to you about my kid. He just came from Hawaii. He's on the kindergarten reading level at 3rd grade. You're like, man, I'm 22. I don't know what I'm doing. And just an incredible experience. Nothing like it, honestly.
Just that light bulb moment, like when you see them kind of get it, or they, that's awesome. That's cool. Yeah, we could go on a rant and a whole episode on how teachers need to be paid what they're worth and how they need to be paid better.
It's not going to change, man, until there's supply and demand. And whenever that supply and demand issue surfaces, I really feel like technology will swoop in and replace a lot of it, because they're just going to say, well, fine. We still need teachers, but I just don't see that changing, unfortunately, in America.
Yeah. And then you mentioned the kind of the mentor you had. I'm always looking for little nuggets of mentor, for recruiting. So how did you connect with him, and what was it about his approach that helped you? Because I've been through in my career people that I reached out to that were aces at what they did, but they didn't want to share that information. They didn't want to teach. They didn't want to give it down. They didn't want to give out power, as it were, the knowledge to help, because then you took away some of their shine, and they're the hero. They get to come in and save the day. But, what was it about that relationship and how it developed?
Well, I think him being a career, job filler, he had a lot of experience working with a lot of people going through tons of things, and him seeing this guy that's about his age show up as a brand new recruiter, never had done it, has to be like blank slate, And I think he understood to some degree the heaviness of that scenario for me. I will say that was definitely the lowest time in my life, was that 2-year period, mentally. Really struggling with did I make the right decision for my family? I packed up my kid and took him away from his grandparents as soon as he was born, pretty much, just not making really any money, even though I was crushing it, statistically, just not understanding the corporate world. But he was very good at shielding for me. He did demand quite a bit. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just the scenario that we had jobs opening up at, 10 p.m. Eastern time. Then he would say, hey, you hit this hard tonight, you might be able to find the low hanging fruit. And I bought into that. And it did create kind of a work monster for me. I wouldn't say that in a bad way. I would say it's helped me a lot in my career. But he didn't cut corners, he didn't do anything unethically. There was certain situations I remember we could have closed, and I thought I was going to close it, and he was like, we shouldn't do it. And at first, you're, as a recruiter, when you're about to close a deal, you're living and breathing by your deals, especially when you're just trying to figure out, can you be successful in a new career? And he would pause it and say, I don't think we should do it. It's not worth the risk. And that ultimately ended up showing me a lot of value in making the right decisions. Just the work ethic he had, and the granular details he had, it made me care a whole lot about them. And that's trickled down into every chapter since. And then my next recruiting job, Jack Hall, he was the founder of HuntSource, and he was incredibly wholesome about people. And you could just see that liveliness with him. You couldn't walk down the street with this guy. I mean, even homeless people are like, Jack, what's up, man? Like everybody knows this guy. But he was always about like, listen, do the right thing. He totally let me be myself. And whereas, some people would be like, you're talking to the wrong people. Why are you talking to these low-level people? He understood the long-term value of that and was totally supportive of it. So if I got off calls for 45 minutes to an hour, whereas everybody else is like, you need to be off the phone in 10 minutes. I mean, this is someone's career. I don't care if I fill this job, maybe if I'm going to fill it, if I'm supposed to, but I'm not going to figure that out in 10 minutes, And so that allowed me to really get into an understanding of who I wanted to be in that role. And I think that might be one of the most important things for any of us, is understanding like, who do we want to be in this job? How do we want to carry out this job? Not, can I do all these bullet points? Because that's not life, that's not what it's about. So, different types of mentors, in little ways that really helped out.
Yeah. That integrity. And that's, I was just thinking about my experiences with recruiters, and I don't know, I don't know what most people's typical, if there is a typical experience with recruiters.
Not so great.
Yeah. Usually it's not, integrity isn't one of the things that comes up to the top of the stack.
No.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was a little combative, like, I don't think this is the job for me. And they don't want to hear that, right? They get you close to the deal to be done, and they don't want to hear you say, I don't feel right about this. I have thought about it and talked about it with my family, and I know it's more money, but it's not the right opportunity. And that sparks fires, and they were like, well, what do you need? What do you need? What can we do?
Personally offended, basically, like you've crossed them. Like, how could you do this to me? Like, what?
Yeah,
it's my life and my career. I'm sorry
exactly.
that you brought me, it's like, it's the pressure usually from the companies. I think recruiters, I would compare recruiters to politicians. I think a lot of them start out with good ideas and they want to do things that change the world. And then you fall into the system and the game. And if you want to keep your job, you better make those calls. You better close those deals, do what you got to do. And it's a pressure that I think a lot of the younger professionals, they're coming not knowing the difference. They don't have good mentoring and whatnot. And they develop a system of how they operate. I've seen it a million times. I used to go to bat publicly for a lot of recruiters until I realized, nope, they're kind of all the same. And there's some really great ones out there in this field that I would definitely say are not the same. Like my buddy Pete Strauss, like that guy is He is intense. He really cares. He doesn't cut corners, and he will struggle personally on the behalf of making sure he's making the right decisions for people. Like, there are people like him out there that they don't waver. But most of these folks, they have no choice but to do what the companies tell them, or they're going to lose their job. It's a very cyclical profession, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So you were talking about making deals. So for those like myself and maybe others listening who aren't really familiar with how a recruiter works, is a deal, well, can you explain kind of what you meant by that making those deals work?
Great question, because there's really several different types of recruiters. You have your in-house recruiters, corporate recruiters. They are not usually incentivized or bonused to get the jobs filled, and they might have 20, 30 openings, and they're prioritized by who is the manager lurking over their desk the most. I was an external recruiter, a third-party recruiter. So basically, I used to tell managers, like, I hate that my profession exists. My profession existed because you guys have already waved the white flag on not being able to find someone. And you say you can't pay enough for this job, but somehow you found $30K laying around to pay me to go find it. And I would say, why don't you take this fee and turn it into a sign-on bonus for that person? And they go, well, that's unfortunately not the system set up. And I'm like, anyways. So yeah, a lot of the roles that we were called upon, they've kind of basically said, like, we're giving up. We would like for you to find it. You're supposed to partner with internal recruiting, HR, and the managers. A lot of times they're not bought in, And I remember I had a, I think it was ISC Squared Twin Cities event that I did. And I think I did it actually with Pete Strauss. And a question I asked was, it was like 35 managers. And I said, when's the last time any of you guys asked a candidate, what was it like working with that third-party recruiting firm that we hired and paid all that money to? And they all laughed. They're like, never. I've never asked that, There's a real disconnect by it. And so oftentimes the third-party recruiters are kind of on their own a lot of times, and they are busting their tails to fill that job, because if they don't, like, you don't have just this pipeline necessarily unless you got salespeople out there. But when you build these relationships with people and you build a network long enough, then you can see past the deal. It's when you haven't been in it and you don't have a big network, I feel like you're just like living on closing that, meaning that person accepts the job. You get paid based on what they get paid. Usually if it's full-time, the higher that their salary, the more you get. So you want to fight for them. If it's a contract job, the lower they go, the more money you make. So if you're a contract recruiter filling contract jobs, your first like benefit is to beat people down on the money they're going to make. Like, that's a terrible system, in my opinion. Like, the first thing you're going to do is say, go get them less money and make their life not as good, so that you can make an extra $150 a month in your commission. And then you don't even have to go to work that day. They have to go to the work that day and you get paid. Wow. Terrible system. So that was what I gave up after the first 2 years. I was like, I hate this. I hate this entire setup. But full-time stuff, a lot more incentivized, longer term play. You get more chance to get to know people, to where you can say, hey, listen, man, I know I got you to the offer, but you don't sound excited. Like, there will be more jobs. Don't take it,
So starting off, like, entry level, in your experience working with people that are trying to get into the world of cybersecurity, what are some things that you can maybe tell our listeners to watch out for or look out for if they go down the route of working with a recruiter? And maybe in your opinion, should they work with a recruiter? And if so, what are some key things they can be looking for?
Great questions. I mean, I really think that if you can talk to people that you trust and ask them first, do you have any recruiters in your network that have been good to you or have at least not screwed you over? That's a good starting point. If you don't have a network of people to ask about that, getting your resume out there on some of the kind of more generic sites like Indeed. This is where a lot of the contract recruiters live, and you will have 6 or 7 people follow up with you at the same time about the same job. They all just got off the same call with the client, and they're now in a race. I think it's always good to go up expecting a good experience, but with your guard up. I think most people go into it very reserved, and they are ready to not share information. They're ready to not trust, and a lot of times that's from experience. But there are some folks out there that they genuinely want to do a good job for you, and sometimes the candidates are really the problem in having a good relationship. So my first advice is to go in with good expectations. Secondly is to not shield information. When it comes to compensation, if you know what you need, say it. and bring it up, and not, the more you can bring up and the more you can address the uncomfortable with a recruiter, the more that person is going to want to call you back and talk to you. When I'll say, as a recruiter, a lot of the teammates I had, a lot of the people I worked with, they were very nervous to ask questions. If they got bad news on a Friday, they wanted to wait till Monday to give it. They're not exactly confident a lot of times in their role. And so if you can get rid of some of the awkward questions and the topics and just address them head on, and then just kind of show appreciation for, their efforts, you can build a rapport with them to where they really want to go to bat for you, and you're going to stand out more. And I promise, it makes a massive difference when that attitude comes to the table, and just makes, especially younger professionals' lives a little bit easier. So that'd be the best advice I could say if you're just going into new relationships with recruiters.
Okay.
But then also, if they burn you twice, they're done. Once can be a mistake. It can be they have 50 people they're talking to. It could be something's lost in the cracks. It could just be they are hungover, But at the same time, if it's twice, it's probably just don't take it personal, move on.
Okay. Yeah, and my experience was I was really naive. I didn't know what to expect from recruiters. Mm-hmm. And it's been a long time. I haven't talked to recruiters for a very long time, but
good for you.
Yeah. But when I did, I guess I was more open-ended. I didn't know how to navigate the compensation thing, because I didn't know if they were actually in it to help me or not help me. Were they working for the company, or were they working for me? And that was unclear for me at the time. I wasn't sure. Do I tell them and then they're going to lowball me? Like you said, it depends on what it was, if it was contract work or not. But I didn't know. So a lot of that I experienced was just trial and error. Okay, that didn't work out, and now I know, and now I kind of felt more, I understood more how to navigate and communicate with the recruiters. Then I just kind of was like, listen, this is what it is. This is what I'm looking for. If it works out, it works out great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And was more open about where I am and what I'm looking for. But that took me a while to kind of get there, because of the trust level, because, you don't know these people, right. And you don't know what their motivations are. So it is good to hear, that side of it, what their expectations are and what their goals are really, and what their motivations are.
Trust is pretty hard to build, organically anyways, but with a stranger that you don't know their motivations, it's very tough. It goes on the same side as a recruiter. It's tough at times to really invest and tell a client, I think they're all in, when you haven't heard from them in over a week. Mm-hmm. I've had some very close people that I have gone to bat for multiple times and really stuck my neck out for. They burned me, in the end. And I know they feel bad based on the messages I've got, but I kind of am like, you know what? It's okay. It's life, but I don't need to spend my time anymore on that direction when there's a lot of people that want to get it. Trust is hard though. But, on the same side, I can't tell you how many zero trust architects I talked to that gave me all the information within 5 minutes of meeting me on a phone call about their company. It's interesting how the when you're a recruiter, how you just get all these secrets. The information I had about companies when I was recruiting, and the stuff that I knew was coming down the pipeline, to where I could call some of my candidates that worked there, or just friends. I can't even call them my candidates. Most of the people I helped, I didn't get jobs for. But to be able to hit them up and be like, hey man, I can't tell you how I got this information, but you might want to start updating your resume. I'm not saying you're going to get cut, but a lot of you are about to be cut, and you just get a lot of secrets, and I think if you're willing to share that stuff, there should be a protected kind of confidentiality, but I've seen some people take that information. I know a recruiter, he used to call his candidates other companies that they were interviewing for and badmouth them to get them to not take that job and take his job. And then he would also take his people from his clients and place them at other clients, and he would get paid twice. This is a big name in the industry too, this guy. There's folks out there, you got to have your guard up.
Yeah. Man. Yeah. Be cautious. But yeah, no, that's great. I was thinking, is there anything else from the recruiter? So as you talked to Heath, and you were starting to, I don't know how was it a niche for cybersecurity, or is it just another type of position you were trying to fill?
It was an OSCP required on a pen test job. That's what it was. And this is back before the explosion of certifications. Really, the OSCP was kind of the only measuring stick out there.
Yeah.
He was living in New Mexico. I remember hitting him up. I remember the conversation very vividly. Like, I remember the first conversation I had with him. I remember having to leave the office to go home to be with my family. I remember pulling through my gate and punching in the passcode. And I remember sitting in my driveway at my little son and being like, I'm sorry, buddy. I can't come in yet. I'm still in this chat. But I had a pen tester role with a manager that I thought the world of. Like, this guy was the type that would interview you, rule you out in 15, 20 minutes and talk to you for 40 about career advice and giving you exact things. Just very brilliant guy. He went and got the OSCP because he's like, I can't have a team who has this and I don't have it. He's more from a developer background, but highest integrity in the world. So I would go to bat for this guy all day. I would have worked for him for free, and not taking a fee and been very happy. And so Heath was kind of on his journey and looking to break into pen testing. And I think he was a good fit. He had to move across the country though for it. So that's another thing. Like, you kind of got to talk somebody out of it. You can say, are you sure this is, excuse me, are you sure this is a good fit? But built a good rapport, because he was very open. He was very much like, I'm in it. And he could tell I was in it. And so he was willing to put in the work. He was willing to prepare. He was sharp as heck. He's a very, very smart guy, but also incredibly organized and very well thought out. And it made my life very easy, and they took a leap on the guy and he came across and it's just, you never know where life's going to go. I never would have thought in that moment, this is my boss in 5-6 years, Never.
Yeah.
It's cool though. But, just doing things the right way as a recruiter. I think we prepped at like 10 p.m. or something that, for his interview, I was on camera just like this, going through his presentation. And when you're talking about trying to change someone's life that way, if you're not willing to put in 20, 30 minutes to really prep, I just don't think you belong in the profession. I think it's kind of like a no-brainer. Why are you really doing this? And the people that don't do it, they swing and miss on a lot of deals they could get done, honestly. So.
Yeah. That's great that you mentioned the prep. So I'm curious, what does that look like? Or you don't have to talk about this one specifically, and you probably are doing that even now with the career coaching. But what does that look like for prep? Like, how do you help people get ready for interviews like this?
Great question. Everyone's different. I think that there's definitely some generic questions that I tell people to make sure, topics to look out for. Like, if you have multiple interviews, for example, ask these questions to look for consistent messaging from people. That's it. It doesn't mean you're going to rule the job out if they're not on the same page, but it's ways to discover, do they really know what they want out of this job? So there's a good handful of generic questions that I will give people and make sure that they ask throughout the entire process. But really, like, there's also some folks that they get so panicky and they get so anxious. And so you have to address that before you address literally anything. Yeah. And so one thing that I've been telling people forever is, like, block out that 20 to 30 minutes before the interview and just do something that you love, that puts you in a good mood. I have a stupid video from Team America World Police. It's this guy is just in the street vomiting for like 5 minutes straight. And I don't even remember the movie, but that scene, I cannot watch that scene without losing my mind laughing. So if I go into any kind of serious situation, my energy's up. I might look at videos of my kid when he's 2 years old singing and dancing with me, and I'm just great mood, feeling good. And if you can't get over that part, the interview can really fall apart quickly. You get in your nerves.
Yeah.
I think preparing people very specifically, like, hey, I know that this guy's going to be on camera. I want you to prepare for someone else to be there instead of him and not on camera. And if they're not on camera, stay on camera. Like little things to just think about, like, hey, email them, reply to that calendar invite, and just say, hey, by the way, here's my phone number in case we have any technical issues. And also here's a copy of my resume in case you don't have it on hand. Just little things that say I'm prepared.
Yeah.
Ways to respond to the recruiters or the HR without being annoying and saying, hey, any updates? It's like, how can I trigger an update by actually sounding prepared? Here's my calendar for next week, just in case they want to talk to me. These little things I think can help people incrementally
stand out.
Yeah. And make sure that they're feeling like, okay, I'm winning on this step. I'm winning on this step. And at the end of the day, remembering you can do everything right and still get beat, or the role can get pulled. So to not try to get too emotionally invested, but also to never just go, yeah, we'll see how it goes. Like a lot of folks I talk to are like, yeah, I'll take it, but not that interested. I'm like, even if you're not interested, treat this like your life depends on it. Go all in intensely preparing and being ready for it, because I promise you, I wasn't thinking about being at TCM. Like, you have to be ready for something to catch you off guard and go, this is actually a great time in your life to go this pivot. And if you don't go in with an open ears and open mind, like, you could miss out on something that was gift wrapped to you as a game changer. And so everybody's different. Their mentality's different. I definitely don't have a blueprint for, hey, do this for interview preps. Like, I have to be as effective as I possibly can. I really have to talk to folks.
One of the things you just said that we've said, and I say to people, and I try to do the last time I interviewed, which was like 15 years ago, but is asking those questions. Like, you're interviewing them. You need to know, and it puts you less on the defensive and more on the offensive, right? When you're always on the defense and you're getting drilled with questions, then there's a mindset there. But if you're more like, hey, I need to know if this is the place I want to be, and is it a good culture? Do they have underlying problems? Whatever, this is your chance to try to dig those up as best you can, throughout the process. But that changes your mindset a little bit to be more offensive minded versus being on your back foot, right? And it's weird though, because when I was first looking for a job, I was like, whatever, this is a job. It's just going to be great. And then I was like, no.
Find out the hard way.
Yeah, find out the hard way.
Yeah.
One thing, this is just a side note real quick. I was just on an interview this week, and we were doing a Zoom interview, and I don't know this 100%, but I think that this guy was literally recording our questions into ChatGPT and then would read off the answers
from
ChatGPT. Like, he was pretty good about it, but there was 100% he was reading. Not every question, but like kind of in between questions. And I'm like, I can't believe this. And there's another guy on our team who was on the call, and he's like, is he reading this from ChatGPT? I said, I thought the same thing.
Probably. Yep.
And I was like, this is not good, man. That's you can't do that kind of thing. And it was weird, man.
So how were the answers, John? Was he actually answering the question?
It was like ChatGPT would answer. It was well thought out, but it was, robotic and like very formal, like not like a person.
Oh, man.
Cybersecurity is very important.
Yes. It was weird, man. It was weird.
I wonder kind of where is that person mentally preparing for interviews that they decide that is my best course.
Yeah.
That I can't answer the questions myself.
Yeah.
I'm going to read them from this thing, and that's better.
Wow.
That's what I'm saying. That's like a whole, I couldn't give a blanket interview prep for someone like that. You got to figure out like where did that come up as a good idea for you, man?
What do you really want? Do you really want this job?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
That's uncomfortable.
It was weird. It was weird.
Yeah. I had a guy lay down actually one time. He was
lay down?
In his bed, like this. And the client called me and they were like, he's really strong, but honestly, we just could not get past the fact he was laying down. And I said, that's my fault. And they were like, how's that your fault? I was like, I didn't tell him not to lay down. I guess I didn't adequately prepare him, but you never know.
Yeah.
It's so, like John mentioned earlier, so we're hiring managers. We hire people once in a while, and it wasn't too long, maybe a year or so ago, it was an entry-level cybersecurity SOC analyst job, and it just blew my mind how unprofessional some of these people were that were applying and showing up to a Zoom call with like a white tee and like not even like presentable at all, messy hair. They were sitting in their kitchen and their dad was walking behind them without a shirt. Wow. And I'm like, guys, come on. Like, at least, come on. Like, have some sense. It's just amazing.
I think the COVID, man, since the last 4 years, everybody got very comfortable at home. I mean, the stuff you hear, I guess now, I think we've gotten very closed up and kind of forgot the way of the world. A lot of people have, or the younger professionals may have never gotten the exposure yet. A lot of them got kind of locked down and then stayed locked down. They prefer to be locked down. They don't go out. They don't get a lot of people skills. It was great. I was at Wild West Hackenfest this last week, and Wade Wells gave this presentation at the end, and it was really focusing on about social connectivity and being a part of something. And he was equating the lack of social interaction to like if you don't socially interact, if the the health equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And it was all these different stats about the impact it actually has on our energy, our health. Like we obviously all know that, and human interconnectivity is important, but some of these younger generation, they just have not had it. I get on some calls with some of them, and it's very, very tough to. I feel like I can talk to anybody, and it's tough to get stuff going. I don't envy you guys in those hiring chats.
Well, we were just talking about this on our last episode, where there's a couple articles out about Gen Z getting fired because they're not. Some of it is maybe COVID related, where they're not interacting, they're not showing up professional. Social skills.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it was kind of the trend. And it's one article, but I know my kids, like they went through their COVID kids, right? They went through that, and I have to force them to go talk to the adults. Like, no, you have to order. I'm not going to order for you, right? And so it is a thing. It definitely is a thing. Unfortunate. And not everybody's built to be an extrovert, and I'm not. So it just takes, like, you have to kind of learn that where you are and how to adapt to those other levels. We were talking about that today. Is like, you just have to understand that that's okay. It's okay not to want to be the outgoing person all the time, but understand how to communicate with people and how to connect. You need it. We all need it because we are social.
Yeah. Read the room. Can you read the room? And can you come up with some words that make sense for the appropriate audience? So it happens so much in this field, so much of that disconnect, not understanding the audience, not understanding your surroundings, and not knowing how to properly communicate with it. It's not a thing you can just go watch some videos on and learn overnight, but it is something you can practice. It is something that you have to put yourself out there in and not just let the world come to you, because at some point you'll get passed by, I feel like.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I want to talk about the career coaching first, Steve, and then we can talk about some of these topics that we kind of brought up, depending on time. But talk about what that looks like with the program that you guys have at TCM. What is that like, and how are you involved? And I think you're running it, right? You're the guy.
I'm running the first part of it. It definitely was here before I got here. I remember talking to the creator of it, Zach Hill. He's over at Black Hills, and I talked with him and Heath probably a couple of years ago about this before it was created. I was very happy that they were starting something up, but it kind of also centers around our certification program. So it's not just getting our PNPT, which is our practical network penetration tester cert, because that's a very manual experience. You have to perform a legitimate pen test. You have to do the debrief and the report and everything. That can only take you so far. Can you do something with this? Now, what do I do with it? How do I market myself with it? How do I actually deal with preparing for these interviews like we're talking about? How do I update my resume to tell my story in as human of a way as possible without sounding ChatGPT? And how can I honestly find all the little things that are part of this system of applying that I am good at cutting corners on and sort of eliminating, the unknown, if there's certain connections and whatnot. Like, there's all kinds of stuff that we do. Like, I don't know how many calls I have for this, but basically the program, I want people to understand this doesn't end when your program ends. That's kind of more just my personal way of looking at it, because they may not get the chance to really put these tips into work for 6 months. The goal is to ensure that we have a bunch of students that come through that we can help them go find the jobs. But I can do everything right, get them teed up for an interview, and they may be late. There's a lot of things that are out of our control. So we never promise jobs or anything like that.
Sure.
The goal is to arm people with tips and tactics that they're going to use for the rest of their careers. I firmly believe that looking for a job is a skill set that I think is maybe the most important that we can learn, especially in a field where 65% of the jobs are 4 years or less. So if you're 23 and you're coming into the field, you've got a 65+% chance of having 10 or more times you're going to have to go look for a job. By 3 or 4, you need to be getting really good at knowing, where is my ROI? Where do I want to spend my time? Who do I know in my network? And by job 5 and 6, they're coming to you, And so it's really about switching the mentality of being a job seeker and blowing people's minds with a onslaught of information that they're like, holy moly, like, I've never thought about this. And but you have to get to know these folks. I'm talking to someone today that's in Germany. He's from China. I'm talking to another guy that came from Saudi Arabia, and he's in Chicago. I talked to a 41-year-old construction worker who's becoming a pen tester in Turkey a few weeks ago. So
Wow.
I'm learning all the time too. It's not like I'm showing up and being like, hey, here's a bunch of advice. It's like, tell me, what is it like in your local community? And I
Yeah.
had a 17-year-old kid who graduated at 16, who is like, doesn't have a network of anything. There's no way I'm giving the same advice to these different folks. So
Yeah.
it's really fulfilling. It's very, very much the thing that I would say I enjoy doing the most over here. And I'm hopeful that other organizations, are doing some similar things and really putting some extra time in instead of giving like a template.
Sure.
Because people are people, man. They're all so different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. No, that's good. I mean, we get excited about that too. As we get to connect and with our students that we intern with, we try to help them in that way. And then just through this podcast, just offering it up for folks like, hey, maybe I can help, maybe I can't, but we've got a lot of perspective, and also being able to look at it from, we hire people, this is what we're looking for.
Yep.
And I love helping people, right? It's just awesome, because I didn't really have as much help through my career and had to figure out a lot of things. And if I can help somebody not repeat my mistakes and learn some of the lessons from my mistakes, that's great. I really appreciate helping people. So I do, that resonates with me, put it that way.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is too, John, the same words that come out of your mouth that I would say may resonate more coming out of your mouth with someone. I think that a lot of people have kind of imposter syndrome or whatnot.
Yeah.
Or other people are out there with, the pitchforks and whatnot. Like, you're not qualified to give that advice. It's like, you don't know if that person is going to give the best advice for someone. And if they only have one person, then they definitely need to be doing that if they can. And so I don't agree with what I don't like is the folks out there that are faking helping. They just create videos or something, but never actually talk to anybody. They never actually, like, you ask them, hey, who's the last person you helped get a job? And they couldn't tell you. There's a lot of chasing that FaceTime and accolades, and hey, I just got this award. It's like, you got another award in a field that is getting destroyed every day. Congratulations.
Right.
How'd you get man or woman of the year in June?
Yeah.
Like come on, like, there's a lot of stuff out there, but I think it's important that if you want to help people, that you are helping. And I think it's awesome that you're doing it, because your advice definitely is going to help a lot of people that even I couldn't help.
Yeah, and I tell, and that's what we see. We see these people we help, and it's awesome to see them go advance and kill it, right? And then I do try to say, like, okay, make sure you help somebody else, right? It's not just pay it forward. It's not just me, because there'll be an opportunity, hopefully, and if not, you should be looking for those opportunities, in my opinion, to also just pay it forward, give it back for sure.
I think one of the big things that people that do forget is when they went through their struggles to get a job, and then they move into a position to be able to affect hiring and whatnot, and then they play that same game. And then you see some of them post on LinkedIn when they lose their job, and they're like, I can't get a call back from a recruiter, blah, blah. I'm like, listen, you were part of the problem, and you forgot that you were in those shoes at one point. Yeah. And I think a lot of folks, they forget about the humanity of the scenario until they are in that situation. They're like, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, let's pivot to Steve. I'll let you pick which one of these you think we can jump into.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things we sent you, Joe, was let me see if I can find it here. So one of the questions was, why are people not hearing back from cybersecurity job applications? So we have a good amount of listeners, and so I also do some mentoring, like John as well. And some of the advice or some of the issues I've been getting is people finish, whether it be a boot camp or get their Security Plus or whatever it may be, that they feel at that point, I feel like I'm ready to start and get my foot in the door in cybersecurity. And then they, fill up their resume, and then they go, and then it's crickets, right? And you hear like, oh my God, there's so many unfilled cybersecurity jobs all over the world, and it's the fastest growing industry, this and that, whatever. And they're like, well, if it is, like, I'm not getting anything, and I've applied to over 100 different jobs, and I'm not getting anything. So other than, I guess, potentially the resume, are there other things that you could think of from your experience that could be reasons why?
Yeah, I mean, bandwidth right now is pretty tough. You have recruiters, for example, recruiting teams have been shrunken all over. You get online, you can see a ton of people getting cut. So more jobs on more people's plates to deal with. And so you guys said you had, 168 applications for a recent position.
Yeah.
Imagine if you're an internal recruiter and you've got 20 of those, right? And you're supposed to let everybody know who didn't get it or whatnot. You don't even necessarily know where to start. You're not sure how to prioritize. And when you're just an individual person, like it's very easy to go chat GPT or nothing GPT, and I'll get to it at some point or whatnot. I can't tell you how many candidates I found in our database back in the day where, teammates just had not responded to the job application. I'm like, this perfect candidate here, you missed this one,
we can't find anybody.
No, but I think that unfortunately, man, I really think that we've just grown to accept it. This is the status quo. And so people are like, well, everybody else is doing it, so we're not going to look like the bad guy. I put a post up about this not long ago where I was like, well, I guess the world decided 90 seconds is too much time to let someone know that they didn't make a cut. Especially if they've gone through interviews. Now, if they haven't gone through interviews, you can't individually customize 167 rejections if they're all not fits, obviously, right? That would take a very long time.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I would love if on the top of an application spot there was some sort of check mark, right? That basically said, we are an official will respond partner. We have been we've signed up to be one of those companies that says you will get a response within this many days, and that's a commitment that will keep people coming back to you. I really think that a lot of the folks though that are out there, they're like, hey, I applied to 100 jobs and I didn't get responses, and it's like, well, what else did you do besides applying? I would rather you apply to 20 jobs, and the rest of the time that you would have spent on those 80, you were spending specifically networking or building something towards that. Because if you're thinking of it like, I need the job right now, fine. Go find exactly what you can that's fastest. Maybe it's a contract job, whatever it is. But you should be planting seeds for your next year and the 2 years and the 3 years from now. If you have a target company that you're like, this is it. It's like Wayne's World with the guitar. Like, it will be mine. Oh, yes, it will be mine. Like, you better start planting those seeds right now and start to build a couple relationships and just say, hey, I saw you had this certification and that 2 other your teammates had it. What was y'all's feedback on that certification? You're not asking, do you have a job opening or will you look at my resume? You're asking for something that might be relevant for you to have a better shot at that company, but also for your career. So looking for some little soft excuses to ping people that are part of your target audience instead of throwing a bunch of stuff out there and doing this, crossing fingers and going, I hope it works, when we've already been shown companies don't care. They're not going to probably respond to you. So I think if you just go into it expecting I'm not going to probably get a response, but I'm really going to start doing some work and planting some seeds, then you can still feel good that you're making progress even when you're not getting responses.
And if anything, if you at least build some connection, make a connection, and maybe that turns into a relationship, and who knows, but if you can, that could be a goal, is like, maybe if I don't get this job or I don't land it, but I made a connection, man, that's huge.
Yeah. You never know, like a recruiter. I have a feeling my dog's going to bark, by the way. I'm sorry. I have little neighbors that are coming out of the works. But I have a feeling, I'm sorry. I think that when you have recruiters that you trust, you don't need them to be the one that gets you the job. They can be someone that vouches for you. Or I've had so many people send me their jobs and go, hey, if there's any help you can have. And I'm like, I'm actually connected with that recruiter. Let me send them a message, or let me just, even if I'm not connected, let me send them a note just vouching for you. Hey, I know you got 168 resumes. I'm sure you don't want to go through all those. Float this one to the top. I'm not saying that they're the perfect fit for the job, but I'm putting my stamp on them. And they may never read my note. But it takes me 2 minutes. But that person has to ask me to do it. And if you have a good rapport, you build 3 or 4 of those people over your career. That's all you need. Hey, would you mind throwing a little weight or give me a little help? And if they like you and you've been someone that also referred people to them, showed up on time for interviews, just been a good friend, right?
Yeah.
They're going to take the time out and go to bat for you. And that's why you reached out to them in the first place. And it can make all the difference in the world. I've seen it, made it happen many times. It can absolutely be a huge difference maker.
That's awesome. No, that's really good advice. It really matches with a lot of the stuff that John and I have been talking in previous episodes. So that's great. And I think do we have time for one more, John?
Yep. I've got
one more question.
One more? Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So the other one is how to decode cybersecurity job postings to spot red flags and avoid lowball offers.
Oh, that's good. That's kind of a dual question, dual topic, but really great scenario. Because the job descriptions we all know are not typically super representative of what it is. It's like, here's 1,400 things that we would like for you to be able to do, but these three would be great. I think when you're in a job interview for them, if you get to that chance, you can really vet it out a lot more, but it's pretty tough. And I think don't worry about it too much. If you see red flags, some OSINT can help you with red flags. Look up that job currently at that company and go to past people that work there and see how long they were there in that job. Look and see how long the other people on the team have just been there. If you're seeing short tenures or there was a mass hiring, or you can find out a lot in 3 minutes of just
that's a pro tip right there. You better write that down.
It's very, very like it gives you something to work with. It gives you something to go, okay, I'm not going to cut this job out, but like I'm going to go into it with a couple questions now about how did this job come about? What did the last person do that was great? If you're talking to the manager, say, how is my job going to help your life become easy? And he or she is going to say, well, if you do this and this, now you know the top 2 or 3 things that they're going to hopefully want you to do, and you can prepare for that. But it's really tough to see through the job descriptions that are fraudulent. I would copy and paste kind of a unique bullet or a unique paragraph, go into Google, just hit it, see if it pops up on any other job descriptions, especially if it's from like a recruiting company. You can find out 3 or 4 other recruiting companies that are also working it, and maybe the client that they copy pasted it from, and go, okay, do I want to go straight to the company or do I want to go through this recruiting firm?
Right.
Well, if I go through this recruiting firm, they're going to have to pay $30,000 to find me. Whereas if I just go straight to the company, and if I then message them and say, hey, I saw that you guys hired some recruiting firms for this, figured I'd save you guys a bunch of money, so I applied online. Maybe it goes nowhere, right? But you're trying some different things that help you stand out and to help you figure out a little bit more about the system. But job descriptions are not accurate. Most of them have not been audited. I can't tell you how many managers are frustrated when they're like, well, what the heck? This is what's posted. And I'm like, it's been up for 3 months. You haven't checked it yet? Like go audit it. Make sure that you understand, like, why did we pick these words? And if you don't know that, like, that's why we are in this problem. That's why we're in this situation. We used to go into newspapers and classifieds with a highlighter and circle it and call people and walk into the interview the next day and get a job. Now we've got proprietary AI everywhere and we can't even get a freaking response. It's like, make it as human as possible. Don't wait for technology to solve your problems, but like you've got to be able to pick out stuff that you can pick apart. Going on to profiles, going to the profiles of the team. What do they have listed as their job responsibilities? Okay, so out of these 1,400 bullets, they all have these 5. I think I probably need that experience, or at least I'm prepared to talk about it. When you're talking about money, the lowballing, I think be very upfront again on money.
Yeah.
If you know your floor is 80,000, right? Tell them your floor is 90. Put that at the beginning, but say, hey, listen, I'd like to learn more about how you invest in training. That's way big for me. I might have a kid coming up. What's your parental leave policy? Like, there's a lot of things you can do, but when you know your floor, I wouldn't share your floor. I would share a little higher, and that way, when they come back and lowball you, you look really flexible, but you're actually still in range. But you base it on like saying, hey, listen, based on all the conversations I've had, all the interviews I've had, I can tell that, the range that I expect to land in is between 90 and 110. Depending on a couple factors, keep my eyes open, but you need to be ready to get paid more, even in that too. Finding out like, hey, just to avoid toxicity, is everybody on the team pretty much in the same ballpark? Because people talk. And especially if you're talking to a recruiter, hey, the last 3 people you said you hired there, I don't want to know their salaries, but are we all kind of in the same ballpark? Like, how did you get those numbers? How did you get to the salary point? It's like, ask that to your recruiter and see their response. You'll find out a lot about their honesty right there in that moment.
Yeah. Wow. Man, those are all really good. Really good
seriously.
tips.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, and I say this, and we've said this a few times, is just we have to build these job descriptions and we hate it, right?
Oh my God.
We're the worst at it. Nobody comes in and says, hey guys, we're going to help you learn how to build an accurate, effective job description, right? No. So nobody is good at this. Nobody is good at, I mean, I don't know anybody that's like, man, I'm a master at building a job description. Nobody.
ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I think if you put something out there that's like really human and it has like a it has some spunk and some excitement to it in that first paragraph, and it's talking about the culture of the people, and not just we have a great culture. Anytime you see we have a great culture, it's probably not a great culture. It means you can't come up with something to describe it. But then you're like, hey, here's the 3 or 4 things that as of right now, we are really hoping that this person can come in. After you get good at this stuff and we're rolling, we're expecting you to probably be able to jump into this, not all of it. And if you just say it like that, I mean, I think if I read a job description, I would be like, okay, I feel comfortable with this. You know, like at least I feel like these people are trying to put an honest foot forward. That would make me want to apply just to get to know the people. And, you know, follow up with a note with a recruiter that might not ever get read, or, you know, intern or HR. Hey, I just saw your job description. I've been thinking about it all night. Like, I've never seen one like that. I'm very excited about it. If I'm not a fit, no worries, but I'm interested in your company. So I'm going to be keeping my eyes out for other jobs. Might not get a response, takes 2 minutes, but you also might separate yourself and now get an exciting opportunity to work with people that are like, here's what we got, you know?
Yeah.
Just most job descriptions, they are. I wrote 1,000 of them. They're hard, man. They're hard to put together.
Well, excellent, Joe. This has been awesome. I knew it would be. Yeah, I knew some gold here for real.
All day.
No, this is the stuff that we love. This stuff, you know. And we're on, like I said, I knew we were on the same wavelength. So we'll have to have you back. I'm sure we could talk about this again and more.
Yeah.
So really thank you for coming. Thank you for spending time with us today.
Thanks for the invite, and definitely please, you know, let me know if there's anything I can do to help out with the program and whatnot in the future. First time we talked, John, you know, just kind of what you spelled out, what you guys were trying to do over there, it definitely is different. I think it really means something to the people who come through it. Steve, I think you're a perfect testament to this. It being an effective, you know, setup. But I really think that small communities of people, you know, is where the magic happens, you know, and we can't like expect to know everybody, but the bigger our networks get, it really feels like the smaller they get. So is there anything we can do to help you out? Anything I can do to help you out? You know, give me a shout for sure.
For sure.
All right. Thank you, Joe. So where can people find you if they want to reach out to you, ask some more questions, learn more about what you're doing at TCM Security?
Don't send him a DM. He probably gets 1 million a day.
Coming into 2024, I made this. My only goal was to not be so responsive, and I got way too good at that. My DMs definitely are packed. LinkedIn is a great place to connect with me.
LinkedIn, all right.
But I'm happy to, you know, share my email, jhudson@tcm-sec.com. That's something. If I get emails, I try to respond to everybody, even salespeople. You know, being a salesperson myself, I respect the hustle. But I always try to get back to people, but I know I'm far behind in my DMs. So LinkedIn is really the only place that I'm on anymore. I've shrunk my bubble down pretty small.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you, Joe, again. We really appreciate it. And that's a wrap.
Great to hang with you.
We're out. See ya.